Greetings, shippers. Sometimes when talking about certain ships, one must contend with the fact that they are ongoing, meaning that the works to which they belong are continually being added to. This is especially true of comics. Bearing that in mind, it's time to update/re-examine a pair of DC bad girls, Harley and Ivy, and see just what exactly has changed. Last time we checked in with them, we focused on the history of how they met and the translation of their initial friendship from the television series to the comic realm. Also their personalities, as well as DC's tweet in 2015 describing them as girlfriends without the monogamy. So check that out for a refresher before we go forward, because we're not going to cover everything again. Some in the comments of the previous video took exception at the descriptions of Harley and Ivy's relationship as more subtle and open to interpretation, as their romantic relationship is canon, and to those viewers, overt. So let's examine that overtness in contrast to the visibility of their friendship, and to those asking can't they be friends and lovers, the answer is of course. But the question posed in the previous video is, which do you prefer and why? It is definitely the case that their canon relationship has grown in terms of its prominence over time, and as we are discussing their canon relationship, we will exclude such works as DC Bombshells, which is very much an alternate universe story. We'll focus instead on the main canon, wherein Harley and the Joker are officially broken up, at least for now, and the creative staff has been aggressively focusing for years on making Harley more than a side character, meaning a character who can stand on her own without requiring main characters to make her more interesting, also hoping to make her a character defined in her own right rather than by the Joker. As a result, Harley has maintained a solo series for years with a rotating cast of supporting characters all her own, including a very blatant Deadpool ripoff called Red Tool. Throughout all of this, her relationship with Ivy remains one of the most important to her, and the current slant has a very romantic overtone. From waking in bed together, going on vacation to nudist colonies together, and discussing moving in together, the nature of their relationship is quite clear. And while one can infer extremely close friendship, in order to make it an exclusively platonic friendship, one has to ignore many a cue. However, this was not always the case. So in the modern take on this relationship, at the time of this recording, how is it working? Well, not quite as well as idealistic shippers would hope. In fact, now that Harley and Ivy are a slightly more traditional couple, the pros and cons are becoming much more apparent, even with the Joker removed as a direct obstacle, though he will forever be an object of comparison. What often occurs when it comes to Harley and Ivy is the, well, she's better than the Joker argument, stating that Harley deserves better, which, yes, she does, and that Ivy is exactly what Harley needs. A friend who's been with her through thick and thin. While very true in broad strokes, it is a bit of a rose-tinted view of the relationship. Ivy, like the Joker, is also a supervillain and a misanthrope to boot, hating almost all humans, Harley being a rare exception. However, she has contemplated leaving Harley to rot in her relationship with the Joker, which he has always judged her harshly for. She has also contemplated leaving her behind on schemes, just like the Joker has done. The difference being she often has a crisis of conscience and doesn't actually do these things, at first out of pity and then later on out of their burgeoning friendship. And Harley is not so innocent herself, in the past using Ivy's feelings for her against her to manipulate her, especially cold given she knows what a rare thing that is for Ivy. As of Rebirth, the relationship is shown to have evolved into a slightly clingy Harley hoping for much more of Ivy's affection, which Ivy denies her, stating her mission comes first, making her yet another partner for Harley who was drawn to a bigger cause over her well-being, as well as serving as proof that Harley's tendencies to have the potential to descend into unhealthy relationships is still very much intact. So while the tweet stated girlfriends without the monogamy, it was clear the Harley of Rebirth was hoping for something more permanent, even if it remained open. Which leads to another quandary of Rebirth. Their relationship simply isn't overly interesting to some. For many, the more conflict the relationship has, the more interesting it becomes. Of course, this doesn't have to be the abusive actions of a man like the Joker, however, Harley and Ivy's relationship is now so idyllic there's not much to it. And the story it is telling can consequently appear less unique, as even with the woman's orientation, the basis of the plot has been very much told. The bare bones of it, at least. Two people wanting to be together, but one of them not being able to separate the other demands made on their life in order to do so. Even Ivy's current rejection of something more serious is handled quickly in passing, without much fanfare, in stark contrast to how deep the bond between these two is meant to be. Granted, some view this as a sign of maturity, but for others it simply makes the relationship stand out less, and it is easily pushed into the background. However, some are fans of this less bombastic approach, full of quiet character moments, as they feel it is more authentic and representative of real relationships. while others find this quiet a stark contrast to the rest of the events occurring in Harley's most recent series, which includes an alien-caused zombie apocalypse in its opening arc. So some question if this is the huge step forward for representation that many herald it as, though for some, any representation is a step forward. Others feel that this narrative tells the important story of recovery from abuse, a story that, like the aforementioned depiction of abuse, is rarely told. It is perhaps because this representation is so rare that the relationship is portrayed so positively. DC has encountered enough controversy surrounding their portrayals of Harley Quinn and queer representation in general, so one can only imagine the backlash if people perceive that the Harley-Ivy relationship was being mishandled. However, as a result, it sometimes comes across that it is being played extremely safe, to the point of being generic, despite how distinctive the characters involved are. Yet for some, this is a sweet portrayal, giving each character the happiness they feel they deserve, especially Harley. There are many moments of the two complimenting each other, flirting, and enjoying a closeness not often seen between characters, which for many is a refreshing change of pace that makes the two quite appealing as a ship. Despite how gently the relationship is handled in text, with most intimate activity being hinted at or happening off-panel or portrayed as simple moments between the two, i.e. showering together or Ivy tucking in a sleeping Harley, the art surrounding these two employs a large amount of fan service. Much more since they have become a couple than was previously on display. It is difficult to tell if this is a result of an increase of sexuality in terms of the artwork in comics in general, or as a result of lesbian/bisexual fetishization, which is sadly still very prominent in media at the time of this recording. As a result, there is a fair bit of titillation on display, which, depending on whether or not you are the target demographic/sensitive to such things, is enjoyable, distracting or angering, or perhaps completely unnotable. For those who do find it to be excessive, it is yet another example of queer female relationships being exploited, in hopes of garnering more readership instead of genuinely explored for their content. Though some would argue the two can occur at the same time, and that all relationships in comics are used in the same way, in hopes the visual appeal will draw in new readers and keep old ones. Others note that Harley and Ivy's relationship is different now than when it began, tending towards the kinder side as both of the characters have also changed, and that this relationship marks an evolution for Harley's character away from the abuse of her past. In general, Harley has moved away from being quite as dark as she has been in the past when she was first transported into the comics from the Batman animated television series, and she is no longer exclusively a villain. Instead, she is now depicted as an anti-hero for hire at the time of this recording, killing only those who deserve it, though sometimes who deserves it can be quite questionable. Not only has Harley moved in this new direction, but so has Poison Ivy, who had her first solo miniseries in 2016, surrounding her attempts to be a legitimate doctor and change the world in this way, despite the fact that she still hates people, kills quite liberally, and is involved in some questionable experiments. All of that aside, the two are no longer simply antagonists for Batman, but instead varying degrees of heroes in their own right, with their own plots that follow, which, depending upon where you're joining them as characters, may work for you or it may not. These characters are always in motion, but it is the iconic versions of them that people are most familiar with. So some will take to the more independent, mellow versions of these characters, while others will miss the darker chaos of the past. Some can be nervous about voicing their disinterest in this pairing, as the current climate of call-out culture is quick to label those who do not approve or find it less interesting than other potential pairings as homophobic or resistant to representation. While that may be the case for some, it is definitely not for all. There are many reasons to be for or against this pairing, as discussed not only in this video but in the previous one. Another reason as to why Ivy and Harley can seem like a better match than other pairings is that those historically less positive moments between her and Harley are not as remembered or redepicted with the same frequency as those of Harley and the Joker, which are reimagined with increasing brutality over the years, while her time with Ivy in the past is rarely mentioned, and when it is pretty much exclusively positive. And it also must be noted that there were less negative moments between Harley and Ivy than, say, in contrast, the Joker and Harley, though there were also more positive moments between the Joker and Harley than are currently remembered as well. However, yes, in general, Harley and Ivy do have the traditionally better relationship. As such, two very different stories are emerging, which very much privileges the one pairing over the other. While there is no doubt Ivy is a less immediately dangerous partner for Harley, that does not make her perfect. Although again, some would disagree. The pairing of Harley and Ivy has much potential to be a unique and interesting canon pairing, with both characters finding an understanding that is lacking towards them from the rest of the world. True partners who can paint the town red or just Netflix and chill. Some are hopeful to see a poignant exploration of this relationship on the big screen. The thing with comic canon that makes it so difficult to discuss discuss is that it is constantly in motion, characters' origins, motivations, and feelings often changing. Harley was only created in the 1990s and has at least 4 origins and counting to date, at least in terms of shifting details. With these mutabilities of canon, it is understandable some may be more drawn to the depiction of the two as close friends over their current best friends and lovers depiction. It all depends on what you find the most compelling. And this statement holds true of both creators and fans, as even creators have unique personal takes on this relationship and want to see it go in different directions. For some, they are drawn to the couple because of the writing. For others, it is the fan service aspect, which some may frown upon, but who hasn't at some point or another been taken in by a bit of cheesecake? Again, some may find this rationale problematic, but to each their own. Others are drawn to this pairing simply because of what it represents in terms of bisexual and lesbian representation, regardless of how well or not well it is depicted. There are some who feel any representation is better than none, and that it is necessary for people to see themselves to be able to feel accepted within society, while others may feel that seeking such representation from sociopathic villains is not the best course of action, and that by rendering the two as having such a perfect relationship, it weakens the characters in terms of their villainy. But again, that has already been dialed back for a much more fun, lighthearted tone. However, there are others who would be quick to point out the relationship is actually not perfect, it simply has not been fully explored as of yet. Others feel it is impossible for a depiction of a marginalized group to be too positive, while others feel if the portrayal lacks nuance, it paints an unrealistic portrait of said group, which can in the long run be just as harmful, noting all relationships have their ups and downs, regardless of orientation. And still others feel this is a good depiction, and are enjoying this new direction for both characters, and hope that Ivy can balance her eco-terrorism and love for Harley so the two can ride off into the sunset together. For those of you caught up on Rebirth, how do you feel about Harley and Ivy's relationship at the time of this recording? Do you ship it, or do you find it a bit unmemorable? Share all your thoughts down below. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. A special thanks to my patrons for helping make all of this possible, and as always, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.